I want to give you a very brief introduction of a man who literally needs no introduction. John Gizzi has been the political voice of Human Events, the #1 conservative news magazine in the country, for many, many years. John knows more about more politicians, more candidates, more races, and more districts in every state in the country than I think any 2 or 3 other people put together. If you ever go to his office, you'll notice he has 25, is it, John, or 26 Rolodexes?
38.
38 Rolodexes. So without taking up any more of his time, here is John Gizzi.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I only wish that there were 2 people who are not here today who could have heard that introduction. My mother and father, who just this past month celebrated their 67th wedding anniversary. And if they'd heard Jim's remarks, I think my mother would have been amazed, my father would have been impressed, and my smarter wife would have said, "Have you mastered the washer-dryer part that says permanent press?" But it's always a pleasure to be here in Harrisburg. Then again, it's a pleasure to be anywhere that Jay Carney isn't around to interrupt me. I've been coming to PLC for a long time. It's heartening to see Fred Anton here because I was at the very first Pennsylvania Leadership Conference back in 1989. We had a banquet speaker by the name of Newt Gingrich. I met a lot of fine folks then, many of whom are here today, some of whom can't be here. And I always learned something when I came to the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference, and I always picked up intelligence from my columns. I can remember staying up late at night when a young political activist from Erie County implored me to just do a column about a friend of his who was going to run for Congress in Western Pennsylvania and take on a Democrat who seemed unbeatable. And well, he was so convincing that I decided to do it. And guess what? That fellow still remains a close friend and a source of information. Once later Congressman and my friend Phil English, and the fellow he told me about you're going to see in a little while, Congressman, later Senator Rick Santorum. So I always grow when I come to the Pennsylvania Leadership Conference. By the way, as someone who is a registered Republican in the District of Columbia, it is always heartening to come to a place and drive here and see these license plates that say, "America starts here." Ed Rendell got one thing right, at least. Well, as you know, I cover elections. Jim Broussard said it best. I've been doing this with Human Events for so long, some people say I'm a human event myself. After 32 years, I've seen the House and Senate and presidential races. Let's look at the race as it stands now. Whatever happens at the top of the ticket, 435 U.S. House members are up for election this year. Republicans control the House, and they will continue to do so after this election. And mind you, even Pat Toomey on the Senate side would say the good things come out of the House of Representatives, and they will continue to do so. Let's do the math for a minute. In the redistricting process, some states, Republicans were hurt badly, certainly California and Illinois and Maryland. Then again, Republicans gained in other states where they ran the show when it came to redistricting. Ohio, Georgia, and of course, Pennsylvania. In terms of retirements from the House, here's an interesting figure. 40 House members have decided not to run again or seek another office. 18 are Republicans, 22 are Democrats. Virtually all of the Republicans who are exiting from the House come from districts that are safely Republican. And in many cases, the activity of people who are in the room this morning will help have what I call an upgrade, a solid conservative, usually with Tea Party backing, replacing a more moderate incumbent. And that's why contested primaries are so important. In contrast, in the 22 seats where Democrats are leaving, more than half are from competitive districts that can be won. So any way you slice it, the present control of the House, which is definitely conservative, will stay that way regardless of what happens at the top of the ticket. The Senate is much more interesting. Right now, as most of you know, the numbers are 53 Democrats, 47 Republicans. 10 members of the Senate of the 33 facing the voters are retiring. 3 are Republican senators. In 2 of the 3 states, the seats will stay Republican, and 1 other it's competitive. In 7 states, my home state of Connecticut, Hawaii, Nebraska, New Mexico, North Dakota, Virginia, and Wisconsin, Democratic senators are retiring, and in all of those states, including Connecticut and Hawaii, Republicans have a better than even chance of winning. And at least, and once again, that great philosopher Casey Stengel once said, "Never make predictions, especially about the future." Well, I think it's a pretty safe bet to say that whatever happens at the top of the ticket, the House and the Senate will be in conservative Republican hands. And that will mean some significant changes along the way. In terms of key legislation, in terms of judicial appointments, whomever is president, control of Congress by conservatives will be critical and be a defining moment in the coming decades for our political philosophy and views. Now, I've been covering the presidential race. I left for Iowa January 2nd. I was in New Hampshire. I was in Michigan, all of the key states, South Carolina too. And now I'm in Pennsylvania as you approach a primary. We have a feature in our online publication, Human Events Online, that's known as Gizzy's America, and you get to see me talking with candidates, with voters, just like the people who are here in the room, with local elected officials. And people ask what I've thought of the presidential campaign and being on the trail. Well, here's some observations. A lot of folks, including some I've met at the PLC, say, couldn't we have a better crop of candidates for president? Couldn't we have a fresh face out there? Well, I submit to you there's merit to that argument. But also, one has to ask, would a fresh face necessarily be someone who could handle the national media and the drumbeat of questions? A lot of us like Governor Perry. I thought he was a very decent man, and I've met a lot of people who committed to his presidential candidacy. He was, for a while, that fresh face, and unfortunately, he could not take the test of the camera and the debate and the pressure. Put simply, he wasn't ready for prime time. He may be someday, but he wasn't ready now. Who is to say that the other fresh face that people desired would have been ready to go toe-to-toe with more experienced candidates? So I'm perfectly satisfied with the field out there. We don't always get who we want, but we may just get who we need in the election. Also, it's been said that this process takes too long. Frank Luntz remarked last night that he'd like to see it over. People say it's dragging out and it's hurting the party. Well, I respectfully disagree with that. What's wrong with taking some time to answer a few hard questions, to expatiate a little bit more on your points, to have your agenda, your vision under the microscope? And let me give you an example. How soon we forget that 4 years ago, people said they did not like the presidential contest because it was more a sprint than a marathon, that the nomination was decided before the candidate could be truly tested. And you know the rest of that story. Well, as one who covers the Republican National Committee, I can tell you that your RNC members heard those complaints, and they got into the mundane process of changing rules. And as a result, some states could not have a winner-take-all primary. They were made proportional. Other incentives and punishments were put in to try to keep states from front-loading or keep state legislators from hijacking a process that's the prerogative of a private group or political party. And guess what? We got what we asked for in the nomination process, and we should be very happy with it because we'll get a better candidate in the end. Now, if there's anything I must say I don't like or I'm disappointed with after watching the candidates, it's very simply that all too often I've been bothered by seeing candidates sound as though they're strategists and campaign consultants. Let me put it this way. In 1980, George H.W. Bush won fair and square in the Iowa caucuses over Ronald Reagan. He began talking about Big Mo, his momentum. He began saying he had polls showing he could win the nomination. He sounded less like a president and more like a campaign manager. And that's one of the things that encouraged his opponent to campaign a little bit harder in New Hampshire. And well, you know the rest of that story too. How often have you turned in after a caucus or a primary and seen one of the candidates saying, I've got the momentum now, I can raise the money to go the distance, I can win this state in November and I can beat the rest of the opponents, and they never get back to why they're running for president and what the issues are. That's something that's sorely lacking in this race and something that needs to be returned to. Candidates as the promulgators of issues and causes. It's not fashionable to look abroad and look at other political systems, and I know they're very different from ours. We heard some good jokes last night about the French from Frank Luntz. And Pat Toomey reminded us that when our form of government was created, the rest of the world looked down upon it. And now look where they are and look where we are, the senator said. I would say that's all true. But let's look a little bit at what other parties are doing. In Britain, just this week, the government of David Cameron, long faulted for not exactly being Lady Thatcher's type of conservatives, outdid Thatcherism in a very big way. After 2 years of some of the toughest austerity budgets and cuts known in a Western industrial democracy, the government of Cameron and Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne, issued a budget. It very simply reduced the corporate tax rate twice over the next 2 fiscal years, and then reduced taxes from 50% to 45% on those who create the most jobs and produce the most revenue, the highest income earners in the country. And of course, the government geared for the assault inevitably about class warfare. The leader of the opposition party called it gifts for the chancellor's Christmas card list. The government said that was needed to stimulate the economy. As for an argument about class warfare, let's make the most of it and do what's right to revive the country. That's the kind of thinking that's needed in this country, an embrace of what Frank Luntz called last night economic freedom and an ability to articulate it. In France, not exactly a capital for economic freedom. The president, Nicolas Sarkozy, was trailing in polls. His socialist opponent called for a 75% tax on those who make 1 million euros a year or more. 75% tax. Well, President Sarkozy invoked the image of probably the most beloved of Frenchmen today, the man who had won the Academy Award in the United States, the first time a Frenchman had done so, for his stirring performance in The Artist. He made over $1 million a year. As the president said, if this tax came about, Jean Dujardin would never make movies in France and leave the country. He touched a nerve with that, and he brought up a name that Frenchmen knew and were beginning to love. And of course, when it came to decisive action, just look at what happened last week when the face of terror reared its head in France and 7 people were left dead in the city of Toulouse. Now, in this country, the White House doesn't say war on terror anymore, but terror exists, as we saw in France. With 7 people dead, the president appealed for calm. He met with leaders of the Jewish and Muslim faith, and he also turned loose the security forces to track down someone who had lived there, who had fully bragged about killing the 7 people, and it turned out was someone who had trained with al-Qaeda in 2 trips to northeast Pakistan. The gendarmes surrounded his home. They gave him every chance to surrender, but like a true terrorist, he was going out with guns blazing, and the police finally caught him and ended his life once and for all. The face of terrorism was seen in Toulouse, and it served as a reminder that terror strikes at anyone, anywhere, in any country. And there's only one way to deal with terrorism, the Sarkozy way. Whether the issue is economic freedom at home or fighting terrorism abroad that could touch our homes, candidates must address that. They must go forward with what Ronald Reagan called a bold banner with bold colors and no pale pastels. That will come from people such as the folks I see here, people who come to the PLC like Jim Broussard, people that I've met over the last 23 years and I hope to meet for the next 23 years. So continue to grow, have a great conference. I hope you go over the 1,000 mark next year and continue to build. For as President Sarkozy of France said, to build is as powerful a verb as to love. Thank you. God bless you all.
2
Now-
minutes for questions.
And I'll take a grand total of 2 questions then, or I get the hook. So please be brief, okay? Any questions? Just stand up. Yes, sir. Well, you have to have a chairman, first of all, in your county, like our friend Ethan from Lancaster County, who's running as an uncommitted delegate along with a slate, but promises he will abide by the vote of the people in his congressional district for president in the beauty contest. In most cases, that's going to be difficult to do unless you have a chairman like Ethan who will give a commitment like that with his slate. You know that for all of the 18 congressional districts in Pennsylvania, there's 3 delegates each. There's 3 superdelegates, your state chairman, and 2 national committee people, an additional 5 who are the state gets because you did so well in the elections for the Republicans last fall, and then another 10 who are selected by the state committee. But the only way that you can guarantee that the delegation will reflect your wishes is to really go to the delegates themselves, make sure they're officially uncommitted, and get them to commit to voting for who wins in the beauty contest in your particular congressional district. That's it, and just remember that the votes in the beauty contest for your candidate for president and for delegate are separate but not equal. And I'll take one more question. Questions? General questions. General questions. I think I served under him. Yes. I do believe that depends on the court case right now and the final version of it. I was talking to Gloria Carlineo from Bucks County the other day, and she's ready to run for Congress, for the State House of Representatives, rather, against a fellow named Bernie O'Neill, whom I'm told wouldn't be that comfortable at a PLC. And frankly, she doesn't know what district she'll be in. And again, I will leave that until the issue of state redistricting is resolved. And again, when it comes to things that are finally in the hands of the court, we might as well take out a Ouija board and guess what the outcome will be. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thanks very much, John. And now, just so we'll know, St. Patrick's Day is not really over. Here is an Irish woman to tell us how completely wacky some of our environmental people in Pennsylvania are when they are attacking the one thing that is reviving Pennsylvania's economy. Ann?
Good morning. Some of you haven't heard me before. My name is Anne McElhenney. I'm a recovering European. God bless America. I'm very grateful. I probably, at the PLC, may be one of the only people who's not an American, and I'm very sorry about that, but I do have a visa. And I'm really hoping to change that. When Michael Moore moves to Cuba with his mother, I'm going to be taking his spot here. Honestly, you can't find a greater supporter of this country than me, and it seems to be now my job to go out there and explain to young people in America who are doing advanced anti-American studies at high school and at university how exceptional and wonderful this country is. And I find a new reason every day to love the country even more. I mean, I am such a lunatic. I go to Costco and take photographs of the food. That's me. Dover sole for $3.50 a pound. For those people who cook, you really understand what that means. It's amazing. This is an exceptional country. And one of the recent things I discovered, which, funny enough, not enough Americans know, and I hope I can inform you of something that you didn't know today. And for those of you who do know this, well, shout it out louder. America is the only country on the planet Earth where individuals can own mineral rights. Did you know that? Did everyone know that? The only country. In every other country in the world, mineral rights are owned by the Queen, by the King, or by the government. And I think the reason that America is so extraordinary, and that you have so many extraordinary people, and that your politics is still sensible, is for that very reason. Because people own what's under their feet. I have a very unusual niche in life. I don't know, you know that thing of when you're kind of growing up and you think your life is going to turn out one way, and you look back at a certain stage and think, God bless us, how did I get here? Well, I spend most of my days thinking, how did I get here? 10 years ago, my description of you wouldn't have liked. I thought you were right-wing nut jobs. I thought that you homeschooled children, which made you kind of weird. And I had a conversion experience. I had an extraordinary experience that changed everything. And I think it's instructive, because I think I'm a nice person, and I think most people are nice and are good at heart. But no one ever told me about capitalism. I was 38 years old, and I had never heard of it. Only that it was, that businesses were run by serial killers, rapists, people who basically, mining was done by people who go out with large buckets and spread arsenic on the land. That's who they were. That's all I ever knew. Until I did a story. I was a journalist. I did a story in Romania about a gold mining company trying to open a mine up in Transylvania. And two environmentalists, two foreigners, went in there and stole the dreams of a very, very impoverished community. And I became a looper for capitalism. I became a lunatic for capitalism. And if you're not a lunatic for capitalism, we're all in real trouble here. So as I said, you look back and you think, oh my God, how did I get here? And what do you do in life? I suppose my mission now in life and my major job in life is calling out environmentalists. That's kind of my major mission. And then my secondary thing is going around telling everyone how marvelous America is, and basically slapping people in pubs who say anything different. I know that Frank Luntz said last night that we're all meant to be really nice to each other and all that kind of stuff. And I'm thinking, nah, not so much. No, I just really like to take out environmentalists, and I really like to take out lefties who talk absolute nonsense. And I just wish they'd all move to the rainforest and burn their American passport if it's so terrible here. Just move to the rainforest. Move to the rainforest. If you think it's so lovely to live back to nature, organic, all that rubbish, try it. And don't do it as a holiday. Don't go on holiday to the rainforest. Go there permanently. Just try that electricity-free lifestyle. you will be screaming for America. My God, you'll be screaming for the air conditioning. So this is what I do for a living. So basically, I call out environmentalists, and it's great fun, because I used to believe that environmentalists wore woolly jumpers, and they wore sandals, and they had facial hair, and they were really nice, and they cared about stuff that I was far too lazy to care about, because all I cared about was finding the next beer. So, and then I became this other person and realized that the enemy of the poor, environmentalists are the enemy of the poor. So if you care about human rights, if you care about poor people, you need to go out there and fight and tell the truth and take out environmentalists and stop them in their tracks every time they tell a lie. And that brings me to why I'm here and why I'm in this wonderful state of Pennsylvania. God bless you. And thanks a million for inviting me, by the way. And can I say how incredibly happy I am for you here in Pennsylvania, for the people of Ohio, for the people of Wyoming, for the people of North Dakota and Colorado and southern Texas who have discovered under their feet such a mystery, such a wonder, such a miracle. Such a miracle, but guess what? My God, fight for it, because there's people who'll take that away from you. And they'll do it very effectively. And here's what I'm here to tell you about. So a guy called Josh Fox has made a film called Gasland. How many people have seen it? Okay, please don't buy it. Please don't buy it. Try and find a way of watching it otherwise. But you probably do need to inform yourself. It's a bit like reading the New York Times. I had to give up buying it because I just thought I can't have this in my house. But it's sometimes good to read the New York Times and realize what people think about things and what has been reported as news, which is, basically the front page news stories that are fictionalized. You may as well be going to the movies reading their stories, particularly anything that they write about the environment, by the way. So this guy has made a film called Gasland. I'm going to summarize it very quickly for you. In it, the basic line is that when they started fracking, you start fracking over here. Basically, you stop fancying your wife. The dog falls over. The dog's hair falls out. You don't taste peanut butter anymore. Your leg starts going kind of funny. You start walking to one side. You start falling over, and then your parents both die of cancer within a very short period of time. Well, by the way, people's parents die of cancer, and it's terrible. But everything in your life isn't happening because of fracking, and it can be proved. So the film is full of very emotional anecdotes and beautiful scenes, and he talks about a town called Dish, Texas, where he says everyone in the town has been poisoned. They all have heavy metal poisoning. They all have carcinogens in the bloodstream because of fracking. Well, the health department from Texas went to Dish, Texas, to check that out, and found that in that town, four people in the town had heavy doses of benzene in their blood. You get benzene in your blood from smoking. Those four people smoked. The rest of the population had the same kind of gunk and good and bad stuff that the rest of us have. And yet that's in the film. In the film, they show Dunkard Creek, Pennsylvania. Some of you guys know Dunkard Creek. Dunkard Creek had a fish kill. They show the dead fish. You know those kind of fish. It's like the oily duck. They basically have agents in Hollywood, those dead fish. So they show the Dunkard fish kill, and they say, Dunkard fish kill, fracking. Well, guess what? No. The Dunkard fish kill was caused by runoff from a coal mine. The other thing that they show in Gasland is they talk about water contamination. There's water contamination caused by fracking. Well, guess what? Lisa Jackson, the head of the EPA and no friend of fossil fuels, said that she knows of no case of water contamination caused by fracking, but yet that's in the film. They go to Dimock, Pennsylvania. Some of you guys know the Dimock, Pennsylvania story very well. And I spoke the other day in State College, and there were people in the audience from Dimock, and by the time I was finished, they were all crying, because they thought I was nice, by the way, not because they were like, would she ever stop talking, please? And the story about Dimock, Pennsylvania is extraordinary. There are 11 litigants. There are 11 litigants saying that their water was poisoned by a gas company. You know, a litigant, some people in this room have been litigants. You're annoyed, you're angry, something didn't work out for you, so you're feeling really bad. You're not really the best person to tell the story. Well, CNN and Josh Fox and all these antis went to Dimock, all went to Dimock. They only met these 11 litigants. Do you know what they missed? They missed 1,500 families in Dimock who formed a grassroots organization called Enough Already, who said the water was always crap. And the reason that the water was always crap was because, and you know, by the way, there's much more intelligent people here, geologists and engineers who can explain this better. But because you are such a fortunate land, because you were so lucky, my God, you got lucky, and then you got lucky, and then you got lucky again. You're so lucky that basically the gas just rises up. The Native Americans called towns in America burning springs. Now, why do you think they were called burning springs? Burning springs because the gas just came up, and they lit a taper, and the water went on fire. And in this film, Gasland, the most impressive moment is a guy lights a taper and everything, big flames, which, wow, it's like wow. Except for the fact that people could always light their water in certain parts of America. But he doesn't say that. In the film, he doesn't say that. So here's the bad news. The bad news is the film is incredibly successful. It's been shown on HBO to the chattering classes about 10 times. It then went on to PBS. It's been shown in schools in your local area, so go out there and cause trouble. I don't believe in banning anything, but if they're going to show Gasland, my God, they need some balance, because the film is full of lies. Environmentalists are obsessed with impacts. Have you heard this? The impact, the impact. And apparently, solar panels and windmills have no impact at all. Well, here's a news flash. If you love the endangered birds, as the environmentalists apparently do, you can't have the endangered birds with the wind turbines. Doesn't work. Dead birds. Dead birds. And the other problem with the wind turbines is the people who like the wind turbines don't like copper mining. Well, that's a problem, because you can't have a wind turbine without an awful lot of copper. Join the dots. They love the solar panels. And my God, I just love the lunacy of California, where I live. In Southern California, they put the solar panels up on the part of the roof facing the road, even if the house is north-facing. Because they want the neighbors to see the solar panels. And they're driving around in the Prius, and I love looking at them and going, ha, ha, ha. You are driving around in a car that's powered by coal, you idiot. My simple message is, people, would you please tell the truth? If there's a problem with fracking, we all need to know about it. Just tell the truth. And the people who are anti-fracking aren't. So there's some good news. But calling them out is what we need to do. We have got to call them out. And I have a solution, but I need your help. And if Darren, Nathan, wave at me. It's Nathan, isn't it? God save everyone. Okay, Nathan, can you play this little piece, please? Oops. With volume, please, Nathan.
RTE in Ireland.
And Polish TV.
We've also made 2 independent documentaries, Mind Your Own Business and Not Evil, Just Wrong. We want to make a film about fracking. If you haven't heard of it, fracking is a way of extracting oil and natural gas from the ground. It's been around for decades. But now a new documentary by Josh Fox called Gasland has everybody scared. According to the documentary, fracking is poisoning the water. Not only that, they're claiming that it also can make water flammable. Because of these claims, all over America now, there are moratoriums and bans on fracking.
So I decided to check out Gasland and these flammable water claims. It turns out people have been lighting their waters for centuries in America. There are even places in America called burning springs. That's how much gas there is out there. So I decided to ask Gasland director Josh Fox about these claims.
Most people watching your film would think that lighting your water started with fracking. You've said yourself, people lit their water long before fracking started. Isn't that correct?
Well, yes, but it's not relevant.
This was very odd.
We decided to put the exchange between Josh Fox and Phelim up on YouTube. Almost instantly, Josh Fox and a bunch of lawyers forced YouTube to take it down. We then put it up on Vimeo. The same thing happened. We thought this was really odd. By the way, both videos are back up again now. The law was on our side. But all this censorship got us really interested in fracking and the truth about fracking.
So we went on the road and did a lot of research. We talked to hundreds of people that live right where natural gas is being produced through fracking. And they are very upset, but not because fracking is hurting them. Quite the opposite. In their own words, shale gas is the best thing that has ever happened to them. They are upset, though, because they believe that the story that is being told about fracking is wrong and it threatens their future.
These people have tried to tell their story, but up until now have been silenced.
The stakes are very high. Shale gas could allow America to be energy self-sufficient and could ensure cheap energy for generations of Americans to come.
But it's not only about America. We went to my home country, Poland, and we met with people who spent half their tiny pension on energy costs. Poland now has a chance to make these people's lives better.
Until now, we've funded this film ourselves, but we need your help to finish the film.
Anyone who contributes, no matter the amount, will become an executive producer on this important documentary. You will be all listed in the credits.
Go to Kickstarter.com right now and help us to get the truth out about fracking. Thank you. So we launched this campaign about 4 weeks ago, and so far we have 2,500 names on the credits. I want everyone here to be on the credits. Even $1 will make a huge difference. Because what we're going to try and do is have a huge number of names and say to PBS, this is the people's story. You're not telling the story. You're not telling the truth. CNN went to Dimmock and didn't talk to 1,500 families who said the water was okay. The media will not tell the truth. They will not tell the truth. So please help us to tell this story. Go to fracknation.com, and become a contributor. Anyone who has an Amazon account, it's extremely easy, And we want to put all the names on the credits. This is what we have to do. It's incredible the lengths that people have to go to nowadays to tell the truth. I don't know how many of you knew Andrew Breitbart. Who is an enormous loss. Enormous loss. I spent the weekend with him, the weekend before he died, and he was as pumped up as ever and as angry about the media. But his message was so clear. The social media is what they can't control. And I have to say, I remember last night Frank Luntz asked people here who was on Facebook and who was on Twitter. And I have to say, going around the country and talking to groups like yourselves, it is super disappointing, the fact that you're not involved in the social media. The percentage is ridiculous. They can't shut you up. Do you understand that? They can't stop you on social media. John, what's the name of that CNN woman who got into trouble lately?
Soledad.
This is how it works. This is how it works. How many people saw the Soledad O'Brien thing? My God, she disgraced herself, right? She disgraced herself. You looked at that. If you were an alien from outer space and you looked at Soledad O'Brien, you thought, oh, she must work for the president. I'm serious. You would need to be an idiot not to believe that. So you watch her performance. People started tweeting her. And my husband made a really good point. Prior to that happening, Soledad O'Brien's audience are about 12 people. Most of them are her own relatives. So that every time she finishes a show, she gets lovely tweets. Oh, you look lovely, Soledad. Look at your lovely blouse, right? And she got all these really nice tweets. Then she disgraced herself, like really disgraced herself. And she got tweets from me. And she got tweets from thousands and thousands of people like me. She got so many tweets that on live television on CNN, she said, please stop tweeting me. Don't you want to be involved in this? Don't you want to annoy Soledad O'Brien? Don't you want to do that? And I swear, I go around the country and I meet, these sort of, 90-year-old women saying to me, oh, well, I couldn't tweet my age. Shut up. Do you care? I mean, people talk. I hear this rhetoric, fight and get the country back. It's easy to talk. And it's easy to be here and talk about getting the country back. You've got to do something. You've got to do things. First thing you've got to do is become an executive producer of Frack Nation. And I would urge you strenuously to tweet. When I met this couple from Dimmock, the woman I made cry because she was so thrilled that we were telling her story, I said to her, right now, they're writing about Dimmock on Twitter. Write to them. Get in there in that conversation and say, I live in Dimmock. Her great-grandmother lived in Dimmock. She can talk about the water. And all these elites in New York who want to have holiday homes in Pennsylvania, who just come for the weekend every now and again, but don't actually live here, and don't have the heartbreak of looking at shuttered up towns in some of the most depressed parts of this state, who have had such lovely news lately, such wonderful news lately. And it's so great to see those shutters come down. Towns like Williamsport, which were having a hard time. And look at Williamsport now. We feel good about this. And you go across the border, you just go across the border into New York State, and how depressed and upset they are. We've interviewed 90-year-old farmers, big, massive tears coming down their face. They've had the farm for 5 and 6 generations, and they're going to lose the farm. And elites from New York telling lies is why they will lose the farm. The gas can save them. And that's how they've said it to us. The gas saved us. This is a great story. Please help us to tell it. FracNation.com. Thank you.
Executive producer John Gizzi, already on the list. You know, every once in a while, it takes a guest from overseas to remind us that we live in the one country in the world people are desperate to get into, in a planet full of countries people are desperate to get out of. So thank you for that. And I don't know how to break this to you, but the next panel is also chaired by a college professor. Where do they get these people anyway? The horror of it. Thanks for listening.